Uh, Greetings, YouTubers and live videoers. It's me, Wayman29. 3/4 of the way through the Dead Sea Scrolls, and I finally got to read them. I got through a lot of the ancient Near Eastern mythology and Jewish myths and writings, and most of the Old Testament. I still got quite a few, mostly the minor prophets I gotta check out yet. However, I see an interesting pattern forming, and one pattern is the title of this video is going to be attached to something else, but it's the man Jesus in the right place at the right time. A lot of people used to think that the Essenes were part of the Qumran sect in the Dead Sea area. However, in the last Biblical Archaeology magazine, there were some disputes on whether that was used to make ceramic pottery instead. What happened was, you had these Jewish mystic cults, and they were very apocalyptic. The Essenes were one of them. However, there could have been hundreds of them, and they would have teachers, and they would have rules and community rules. So you get a lot of that. And when the Romans used to chase them down, when they used to have to flee, they used to hide the scrolls in the caves. So the setup for the idea of somebody to come in and have that thrown on them as a person was wide open. There's already stuff talking about John the Baptist-like, Jesus-like, Messiah-like figures in these texts, looking for leaders that would lead them against the Roman Empire into what they would call the Day of Vengeance, which in the War Scroll, which I'm going to post a link to, has some very beautiful holy war hymns. And if you ever wondered what Armageddon was going to be, they had it all mapped out. In the scroll community rules, they have the marriage supper of the Lamb kind of idea, the idea of forgiveness, the idea of the scapegoat, all that foundation that we have today comes right out of the Dead Sea Scrolls. So, I guess what I'm going to start at is talking about the relationship of Revelation to the Dead Sea Scrolls. Because now, currently, after reading that section, what Bible scholars would call the intertestamental period, I've come to the conclusion that currently, it could change, I've come to the conclusion that even though Revelation was borrowed heavily from Babylonian and Roman mythology and Jewish motifs carried over and symbols of demons and monsters and the like, that never stopped. It was carried through the Old Testament, right through the Dead Sea Scrolls, right into Christianity to the end. And the Christian writers were Jewish. Paul seriously pushed the Christian religion heavily to get it accepted by the Jews. And one of the things after reading the War Scroll, and there was a couple other ones, I came to the conclusion that these messages, kind of like the Sermon on the Mount and Peter cutting off the ear, that people were looking for what this sect called the Day of Vengeance, and it's written about in the War Scroll. And it puts a whole new light on this the Sermon on the Mount, because here you have this huge reversal that the people were just waiting for, that listened to Jesus, who was a rabbi or a part of this group, who was a part of this community. As far as John the Baptist is concerned, he could have been stories could have been added to make that appear as if it was a prophecy from before to fit the motif, so they could sell it and say, look, these are the people. However, after they were killed off by the Romans, they were sorely disappointed. Then it went into Revelation, to where you get the cosmic Christ, or the idea of Christ inward. The Old Testament views of Jerusalem there's a couple in the Old Testament, and the Dead Sea Scrolls, actually the Jerusalem scroll, the vision of Jerusalem, is just beautiful. It outdoes John in some ways about how he sees it's much bigger than John's, and when you read it, you'll understand what I'm getting at. This transition, the motifs, it hinged on just somebody showing up to have all this stuff put on them, and I believe that's what happened. The disciples were totally looking for war, and it didn't happen. The people who listened to Jesus, the first will be last and last will be first. That was a constant motivator to throw off tyranny. The whole idea of Armageddon, it's very well explained in detail as the Day of Vengeance, where God will finally come down and kill off. Even you have Jewish people coming out of heaven. These people would come out of heaven and take up their bodies, so you have a resurrection kind of idea. Holy warriors coming back to fight in this fight. You have the numbers of sevens, like words written on instruments and utensils of war. So I'm thinking the whole, I know I'm kind of slowing up. I'm trying to think because there's so much I want to talk about. I'll probably be writing an essay on it at some point. It's really complicated because there's so much imagery and motifs flowing through the Dead Sea Scrolls that in order to talk about it in one video, you wouldn't be able to get it. So, and this is what bothers me. What bothers me is that the Jewish texts are very fluid, and they can be used to either as prophecy to interpret modern day things, like we use today. Like people can read live and oh yeah, this is blah blah blah. So it was used that way. The Old Testament was used that way. Dead Sea Scrolls were used that way. Babylonian Talmud and the Midrash, I don't even know if I'm saying that right, took the biblical text, took the writings, and they made little lessons about them at times to explain them better, maybe correct some things, maybe to elaborate on some things. Gilgamesh shows up in the name. Gilgamesh shows up, I think, in the Scroll of Enoch, in the Dead Sea Scrolls. Maybe there's something online about that. I just got done reading something about that. He was part of the giants when the heavenly beings come down and mate on the earth. There's it's called the Book of Giants, and there's another one called the Watchers, which is a really interesting read about that whole time period, where Enoch judges the giants and persuades the heavenly council to do the floods. So then you get the whole package. At this stage, there's no idea of a virgin birth. It was added later by Luke and Matthew, which is pretty late. They were like in the 70s. Mark starts out correctly. Mark wasn't concerned with genealogy. He wasn't concerned with, because it was obvious. this whole package and this person was put into it come from the line of David, whether he really did or not. It would be made that way and accepted by the people as that way because they wanted to see it that way. A lot of cults and religious groups start that way today, whether it's at the right time, at the right place, at the right time, saying the right things, having the right tools, having the right mind, saying the right words, using the right symbols, the right motifs, at that point in time, creates something huge, and it's been done in the past. I don't really want to get into it right now and what I think some examples are because I don't really care about offending some people, but it happens, and I fully believe that that's what was put on the Christ. Then they had to explain why he got killed off. My idea of it, currently, after reading Dead Sea Scrolls, all the Jewish writings, mythology, things like that, putting it together in my brain, I can fully accept why the Jews were so repulsed by the idea of Christ claiming to be God. They just couldn't hack that. You don't do that. The writers made him say that, I believe, because in this community he would not say that at all because of their strict rules about saying that. So they were trying to persuade, more people to come into the group to get ready for the end, to get ready for the day of vengeance, and they're promising them all kinds of things. And Judas betrays him to the priest, the high priest. Of course, it's going to be for 50 pieces of silver because 50 pieces of silver, Joseph was sold for that. And Judas meets a horrible demise. Of course, because he's a traitor, he's got to be killed off somehow. The ultimate price is, the worst is probably suicide, so. However, there's his guts spill all over at some point in Acts. But what's interesting is he goes back because he feels bad. And he wants his, he wants to give the money back. And he throws the money because it's blood money. And he feels bad and does the deed according to the text. So the Romans come down, they find out about the cult, take care of it. And the temple takes care of it because according to Rome, you take care of it or we take care of it for you. And I believe that the Sanhedrin were really, if it's going to happen this way, they would be really upset about the Romans coming in and destroying the temple and the crucifixion, and boom, so something needs to transcend that. And so Revelation comes in to handle that problem. Now, when you move from Dead Sea Scrolls, I fully believe that next would be the Gnostic texts, because they were Jewish too. I don't care what people say. And they were writing, they had their own views about faith and spiritual Christ inward, because they're trying to transcend the whole, they're trying to deal with the whole death of Christ as the rest of the followers of the sect were. And I believe that it was put on them. They expected war. The day of vengeance didn't happen, unfortunately, and they're kind of left out there to dry, and they were just picked up, unfortunately. So I'm going to be writing some more about this. These are just my thoughts. I don't want it to offend anybody or disillusion anybody in any way, but these texts are definitely worth checking out. Make your own decisions about things, and think about things. And it's okay to dig into things, because if you can rip it apart, it means a lot more. So take care and have a good night.